I'm going to go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining us today for the Summer Food Service Program 2019 Food Safety Webinar, What to Expect When You Are Inspected. To help summer sponsors support a culture of food safety in their summer food service program, this webinar will provide information on educational food safety resources available to summer food service program sponsors, as well as discuss the top food safety violations cited in the summer food service program in Kansas of summer of 2018. My name is Cindy Johnson. Hi. Joining us today is Adam Inman from the Food Safety and Lodging Division of the Kansas Department of Agriculture. And who do we have here? Are you here?
This is Michael Turner.
Hi, Michael Turner. I do not know you. How are you?
Hi.
Have a seat.
I asked Michael. I forgot to ask Michael to join us. Yes. Michael's one of our inspectors out in the field.
Yay.
Yes. Who's running late?
No, it's fine. That's great. Oh, that's exciting. Well, thank you.
Oh, sure. Pleasure to be here.
Michael. That's an easy name for me to remember. That's
Great.
my son's middle name.
Ah, perfect.
Summer food service program meals are often served in really unique locations and in creative ways. Those venues can include schools, child care centers, boys and girls clubs, parks, pools, community centers, libraries, and even parking lots. Regardless of where and how the meals are served, the safety of the food is a top priority. So in order for meals served through the summer food service program to contribute to health and well-being, they must be free from harm. The quality of summer food service program meals plays a key role in the success of the program. Food that has become unsafe and is served to children can lead to foodborne illness, and that can have some serious consequences for children because their immune systems are just developing. They can become very sick, and it can even lead to death. Also, if there's a foodborne illness incident in your program, that can raise some negative publicity, and it really damages the confidence of the program in your community. And those of you who are on a conference call line, can you go ahead and mute your line for now until we get to the part where we're asking questions and things like that? Okay, to reduce the risk of a foodborne illness outbreak in the summer food service program, it's important to provide the personnel with the tools they need to perform those tasks safely. And tools include equipment, supplies, and education. Educational resources provide a way to support a culture of food safety at all program sites, and they are available from credible resources, which we'll go through. Some credible materials are available from the Kansas State Department of Education, that's us, the Kansas Department of Agriculture, that's Adam and Michael, it's the Food Safety and Lodging Division of the Kansas Department of Agriculture, also from the United States Department of Agriculture, Food and Nutrition Services, the Institute of Child Nutrition down in Mississippi, and the Center of Excellence for Food Safety Research and Child Nutrition Programs, which is in Manhattan. So we've got lots of places we can get good resources. The Kansas State Department of Education has food safety resources on the kn-eat.org website. Just go on there, go to the home page, and click on Food Safety. When you get into the food safety section, there's a guide called Food Safety for Volunteers and Students. And this is really helpful to provide training to those staff members or volunteers who may not be involved in the day-to-day operation of a year-round program and really just need some mini lessons. So it's set up in 5 modules that can be used for like individual self-study or those mini sessions. Module 1, which is on personal hygiene, is especially important for keeping food safe, and this includes restricting or excluding staff that are ill from preparing or handling food. It talks about hand washing procedures and eliminating that bare hand contact with ready-to-eat foods. Module 2 just talks about microorganisms, those small living things that can grow on food and make people sick. Module 3 talks about thawing frozen foods, cooking foods, and general holding of both hot and cold foods. Module 4 talks about the importance of cleaning and sanitizing and what the differences are between those two functions. So you can see it has nice little pictures, and they have little activities that people can do to reinforce the learning. Module 5 talks about food allergens and how to keep food safe for customers who have known allergies. The Kansas Department of Agriculture has similar tools to help summer food service program operators know how to keep food safe. Adam and Michael can talk a little bit about that. Would you like to share some of the resources that are out there?
Sure, Cindy. Well, start with this. You can get to our main landing page there through all this fun web address stuff. We do have a streamlined address, a little bit streamlined, and it's agriculture.ks.gov/FSL education. So F is in food, S is in safety, L is in lodging, education. We'll get you right to this page that has this list of educational materials, and as you can read, it's on the screen, there's a variety there. The main one's probably that folks would, if you didn't look at anything else on our website, I'd say look at the Focus on Food Safety program. And that's really distilled the food safety principles into a nice little booklet. It covers all the main risk factors that are most directly linked to foodborne illness, covers them in a pretty straightforward manner, gives a lot of tips. There's a chart for corrective actions and so forth, so that's good. We also have a large number of handouts, and a lot of them probably wouldn't apply to a summer site, but we do have quite a few that would. Cold holding is probably one. A lot of stuff related to hygiene, employee hygiene. So when employees have certain illnesses or symptoms that they're not allowed to work with food, that's important. Anyone that's working with unpackaged food needs to be aware of, the prohibition on bare hand contact and those kind of things. So a lot of those handouts, probably one of the best handouts that we have is this daily self-inspection checklist. And we worked together with our friends here at the Department of Education and took our basic one that's for generic food establishments like a restaurant or a grocery store, and we really simplified it into something that would apply to more of the summer nutrition program sites. And to go along with, I think we'll talk a little bit about the risk breakouts that we have later, but it's tailored a few of those things that'll be seen in each of those risk level breakouts for the summer nutrition site. So this is something that operators could use to just check out how are they doing with food safety principles. So they don't have to remember everything, and the more you use it, the more you become familiar with it. So this is one that I just noticed today that we've got to, we'll put this out onto the website as soon as we can to make sure it's a little more readily accessible if you come to our website. But I think Cindy's we'll also look at getting that distributed somehow. So we'll work together on getting that out.
Yeah, this checklist was updated slightly, and it is going out with the consultants who are going to be doing that self-inspection checklist. But I'm also happy to mail out the copy that I have, the new version of it, to anybody who emails me. I'll type in my email address in the chat box when I have an opportunity. But what I love so much about these handouts that the Department of Agriculture has is they are available. Many of them are available in Spanish. All the key ones are available in Spanish. So if you have a Spanish-speaking population or staff members who need to understand the material a little better and they can understand it through their own language, I mean, they are out there now, and I just appreciate the effort it took to do all these handouts, because I use them a lot when I'm providing technical assistance. It's just so handy to have things in writing when you want to share information with people.
We're actually able to get a lot of them into Mandarin Chinese as well.
Oh my gosh.
That might be a need for some folks too.
Yeah.
It is an effort. So one of the other educational activities resources that we have is a really quick and simple 5 keys to food safety. We asked permission, we were able to borrow this concept from a large national retailer, and they were happy to share that with us. They have it called a little bit differently. We thought 5 keys would be good. So it talks again about employee hygiene is really foundational, then hot foods hot, cold foods cold, cross-contamination, cleaning and sanitizing utensils and other food contact surfaces, and then of course cooking and cooling. So basically it's that cook, chill, clean, separate concept with just 5 steps instead of 4. So we have this available online. You can print it out. We have some resources available left. If you want a name badge, we have a version of this that you can clip onto your name badge holder. We have a lot of those. I'd love to get rid of a lot of those.
I'll take some. I'm teaching summer classes, so I'll take some for sure.
So you can take that, clip it on, and have that handy. And quick reminder for folks if there's any questions, or just a visual reminder to get subconsciously back in your brain.
Yeah, and I love this resource because, I mean, sure, a lot of us who work with the food every day know all these little pieces of information, but those people who don't do this every day, these are just gentle reminders. Oh yeah, I remember them telling me I had to keep these cold foods really cold and that kind of thing. So I do think these are nice.
We also have this one in a placemat size. It was a poster that the printer accidentally put it onto this plastic paper, so it lasts almost forever. So it makes even great placemats. And I think we're running low on the refrigerator magnets. Those were really popular.
Wow, I didn't realize we had all those. So, the United States Department of Agriculture, the Institute of Child Nutrition, and the Center of Excellence for Food Safety Research and Child Nutrition Programs collaborated to develop this resource, which is called the Summer Meals Food Safety Training Guide. This guide can be downloaded, printed, and used to train summer staff on critical food safety practices as they apply to that program site. So you can see, you can make selections, check out all these resources, and see which one is most applicable to what you do. This one is also color-coded. The 3 color code sections promote key practices. It could be used along with the other ones, or in addition, as just a really simple one. But for those of you who can see us, you can see this toolkit. We have some of these toolkits in our office in Topeka. They do have posters, which are color-coded. And the chapters of the little book are also color-coded. So it's just like a little pamphlet, and that's also handy for doing little mini training sessions or doing something in a self-study module. So the first section of it is in blue, and that just talks about good personal hygiene. And I just think the colors pop, and it's just really simple training. The section on number 2 that talks about using food thermometers, which I think is so important in the summer because you're sometimes in environments that are really hot. And I think it's important to know that you're holding cold foods cold and you're cooking foods to proper internal temperatures and holding them properly. So this again is a visual reminder to do that. Section 3 is color-coded in green. It just shows the steps for cleaning and sanitizing and those distinct steps between wash, rinse, and sanitize. So again, we have some of these kits, these toolkits available in our office. They're also downloadable resources. Those of you who want some kits sent to you, Kelly has a few of them, and just email the Topeka office, Kelly Cheney, and she can get those out to you. There is a section also on how to develop a portable hand washing station. I have a question on that. With the soap being next to the paper towels, is that okay? Or would we need to contain the paper towels in some way?
I don't think we have a real concern with that.
Okay.
If you got soap on paper towels, I think it'd be pretty obvious. And you're using those now, if you're using those to wipe down food surfaces or something like that, or to actually serve food on, definitely be a concern. I would recommend a separate supply for that.
Okay. The USDA and the Institute of Child Nutrition jointly developed posters that visually show the steps for proper hand washing and other activities. So you can see this one. It's also in the toolkit. This hand washing one I'm really fond of because it shows all of the steps for hand washing. Some of these resources also come in Spanish. So take advantage of some of these visual reminders in both English and Spanish, just to remind people of wash your hands, no bare hand contact with ready-to-eat foods, that kind of thing. The Center of Excellence for Food Safety Research and Child Nutrition Programs has downloadable hand washing posters, also in both English and Spanish. The center posters can be linked from the Child Nutrition and Wellness website under food safety. Also, just check out their website directly because they have lots of research and data and videos and educational materials that are really helpful. Okay, now that we've talked about some of the reliable food safety education resources that are out there, it's important to evaluate where we can improve on some shortfalls in food safety practices. So I am going to chat a little bit about some of the inspection violations from last summer, and Adam and Michael from the Kansas Department of Agriculture are going to share some of their insights on some of these inspection violations in the summer food service program. So our first one is Adam and Michael. What can a summer food service program site expect during a summer inspection? I don't know which one of you wants to go first, but what can we expect when we go out there, and how should we view this experience?
Yes, well, I think our approach is to work with everyone to try to get voluntary compliance, and we don't expect that folks intend to do things wrong. So we're really trying to provide the resources that we can to help people do what we all want, which is to provide safe, nutritious food for the kids. So the approach is really just a check to make sure that everything's going okay. And if I do identify issues, we work with people to get those corrected in the lowest impact way possible. So the food code regulations still apply. They're designed to help provide safe food and to prevent foodborne illness. So we're going to folks like Michael, we're going to go out on these that are assigned for us to do inspections and look and see what they're seeing. And if they do observe issues, again, Michael will provide educational assistance and maybe some tips and ideas. And if necessary, we can work with their program partners to get things corrected. We've had to do that a couple of times. Mm-hmm. But I think everyone's usually really cooperative and working towards that goal of safe food together. Michael, I don't know if you've seen anything.
Yeah, and I think in general, a couple of points on that slide are not just things we throw out there, the things we believe in, that we're there to educate and there to be resource people. We're not just cops to write tickets.
We all have the same goal.
Yeah. We really do want to serve as that partner to help you provide safe food. That's our goal as well. Sometimes we don't have people that are particularly compliant or receptive, and it doesn't always work that way. But that's our goal going in.
We don't expect perfection, and we recognize there's issues. So what we're looking for is really systems that you've thought about the system, and you've implemented something that's going to control those risks so that we don't have unsafe food.
Part of developing a culture of food safety in the program is evaluating what went wrong in the food handling process to result in an inspection violation and what can be done to prevent that deviation from occurring again. So during the summer food service program inspection process in 2018, several food safety violations were identified at a few sites. The top 8 that were identified in order of frequency are no test strips were available on site to assess the concentration of the sanitizer solution. Cold foods were not held at 41 or below, cold potentially hazardous foods. Availability of accessible and fully stocked hand sinks was not on site. Calibrated thermometers were not used to temp foods. Chemicals stored with foods and food contact surfaces, you can just put I think it's like mute, thank you. Cross-contamination risks, hot foods not held at 135 or above. So these were the top 8 that were identified in just the summer food service program in 2018. So not all during the school year, just summer. So we're going to go through these one by one. Several sites did not have sanitizing solution test strips on hand. So Adam and Michael, why is that so important to have sanitizing test strips on hand? What's the big deal?
My new buzzword is Goldilocks. So if it's regulation, if it's sanitizer or concentration, we're looking for just right. Yeah. So just if you don't have enough sanitizer in the solution, it's not going to be effective, and you're not going to kill any microbes that might be there that could cause illness. On the other side, Some people think if a little's good, a lot is better.
Yeah, more is better.
We don't want to go the other way, which is too much chemical where we create a new problem and we can have some chemical issues with some residues. So follow those manufacturer's directions to start with, but then you have to check because other things can go wrong, especially with chlorine, which is a very common sanitizer. You'll see that maybe lose some of its effectiveness over time. It'll just kind of volatilize off. And so you have to make sure that nothing like that has happened, or that you didn't just have a bad day and a brain cramp and maybe mismeasure something. So those test strips are really inexpensive. Most of the time, chemical suppliers will give those away. We see that a lot. So make sure that it matches the one that you're doing. If you're going old school with the plain household bleach, you can pick up the test strips at a variety of places as well. And it's just a good spot check to make sure you're doing that one right.
I like the Goldilocks thing. This one's too weak. This one's too strong. This one's just right. That's cute. You'll have to bring me along so I can act it out for you. Okay. It's sometimes hard to hold time and temperature control for safety cold foods at the proper cold temperatures in the summer. So Adam and Michael, what types of foods must be held cold, and what are your recommendations for holding them cold in a summer food service program?
If you want to
sure. Things that have to be held cold, are those foods that require temperature control for safety. Raw and cooked animal proteins, so meats, dairy, eggs, certain vegetable products, cut leafy greens, cut tomatoes, cut melons. You probably won't see a lot of tofu in a summer nutrition program, but that would be one.
I don't know. You just never know. It's wide open right now. Hummus is really popular.
Yeah,
and that's another one.
That would be one. But that was sort of the big categories. And yeah, there are certainly some summer challenges, particularly when you're working in sometimes places that aren't necessarily a commercial kitchen or set up full time for a food service establishment. I think some of the things I've seen particularly is make sure you're starting out with food that's good and cold, particularly if you're transporting it somewhere.
And as you mentioned, in the summer it is more challenging.
It's challenging
because there's a higher driver of that temperature change because it's hot outside. So it's gonna make those foods warm up more quickly, and there's gonna be more challenges. You can use time as public health control if you have a proper written procedure in place, and I think you have to have a approval from the sponsor's program director. So that's important. It's something that might be the only way to get things done in certain service locations. So we can do that. We just have to have some extra checks in place to make sure that it's safe. But the important thing is that we're using, I think usually it's easier to do the temperature control. But sometimes you do have to switch over to the time just for logistics.
It's all about managing the risks.
Yeah. I think the other thing you see a lot of times is residential refrigerators are more challenging than commercial coolers. They don't recover as quickly and they struggle more in the summer.
Yeah, and just being mindful of not standing there and holding the door open while you're checking things out in the refrigerator and stuff like that.
And sometimes it's even how much you put in them.
Now there's Yeti coolers, these super coolers, they can have, or some of the traditional Cambro catering things. If you're doing an off-site location, can oftentimes be worth the investment because it will hold the temperature so much better than the little $5 styrofoam cooler from the corner store.
Just watch for equipment grants, because there's often equipment grants out there where you can apply for a grant to get some of these pieces of equipment. Hot holding can be a challenge when foods are transported to other sites. So Adam and Michael, what are your recommendations for holding hot, potentially hazardous foods hot in the summer food service program?
Yeah, I think it's the exact same as the last slide, just the opposite. And you actually get a little help from the summer in this case, but you don't want to rely on that outdoor air temperature because it's still a lot cooler than the minimum hot holding temperature of 135. I hope, I hope it's not that kind of summer. And putting it on your dashboard, although it gets pretty hot, is not a good, reliable method either. So again, these insulated storage boxes or powered ones, just depends on where you're serving. But think about that. Again, you can use time as public health control. there's a little less margin when you're in the hot zone, because go figure, the things that make people sick tend to grow best around human body temperature, which is around the summertime air temperature a lot of the time. So that's, you just have to keep an even tighter control on time as public health control at that point. And I think we might get into a little bit later, but thermometer is going to be one of your best friends for both of those, hot and cold holding.
So why is it so important to have hand washing facilities? Some summer sites have really unconventional locations, and it makes hand washing a challenge. So why do they need to have hand washing facilities?
Yeah, again, Chris's video talks about how you can get to that point really cost effectively and pretty simply for one of those really remote, mobile, innovative nutrition sites. But of course, the reason that we have this is not to help people sell coolers and paper towels, but it's because norovirus, for example, is the leading known cause of foodborne illness in the United States right now, and primary transmission is from humans to food. So we have to keep people who have certain illnesses out, but you have to have hand washing, appropriate hand washing, to help reduce the loads of bacteria in case someone maybe doesn't realize that they're sick yet but still may be contagious. So that, just general contamination, keeping you off of the food, is the reason that we have to have adequate hand washing facilities.
It is a little surprising how long the incubation is on some of these microorganisms and you don't show signs for a while. So it is important all the time. And I always practice good hand washing even before I eat, because I want to protect myself too.
Oh, sure.
So
yeah, and the one I'll often point to when I'm talking to people in the industry is hepatitis A. You're most contagious, I think, the 48 hours before you ever have symptoms. And that's why if you see an outbreak, it's usually not a few people sick, it's 100 people sick.
You also see some tailing off sometimes where you feel better, but you're still at risk. Yeah.
So tying into this a little bit is, I know some places or sometimes people use sanitizers, hand sanitizers, and think that's good enough.
Yeah.
Why aren't hand sanitizers good enough in situations like this?
Yeah, we do get that question all the time, and I think there's sometimes an emergency where you have no choice, but this is something that you're being able to plan for. And what the counter argument, the question we were asked a lot is, well, I go to healthcare and they just use hand sanitizers. Well, their foundation is still hand washing, but then from patient to patient, or from this thing to that thing, these activities where there's not any soil, they're not really being exposed, they're in a relatively controlled environment all the time, the sanitizer works. It also works better on some of the organisms that they're trying to control. There's a lot of the effectiveness on norovirus isn't really there with the alcohol-based hand sanitizers. So it's one of those things where in a pinch it may be better than nothing, but where you've got the opportunity to plan for something, and you've got the things that we're dealing with in a food environment. At this point, the science just doesn't support hand sanitizers, or as they're really technically called, hand antiseptics, in place of hand washing. They can be used as a supplement if they're appropriately labeled hand antiseptic, but they cannot replace hand washing.
And really, that hand washing gets all those germs down the drain. It's not so much killing the germs, it's just flushing them off, getting them off your hands.
Right.
So
the soap loosens their grip on your hands, and the water flushes them away, and you actually get another additional reduction from the paper towel drying. Will actually grab some more that's left and trap it in the paper towel.
Okay, so why is it so important to have and use food thermometers in the summer food service program?
Because you don't know what food temperatures really are unless you have a way to measure them.
But if I touch it and it's hot, is that good enough? Or cold?
Show me your last calibration right here. Then we'll talk. But I mean, I think if you're frank about it, some people can get pretty good if they do it on a daily basis. They're doing this and that. They can get a pretty good idea.
Like a chef.
Yeah, like mom can yes, I think 72 degrees, maybe in October. So there's just this relativity that's there. There's just all kinds of room for error. And so a properly calibrated, properly accuracy checked thermometer is so important for all these food temperatures that we're worried about. and also an appropriate type, because if we're talking about a traditional stem type thermometer, that's going to be great for a large volume food or something with some good mass to it. But if you're talking about a chicken patty or something that's very thin, you can't get the thermometer all the way in where you need it to be. So you really want one of these thin tip probes that measures on the end of the thermometer tip.
This is so a part of who I am. I
Yeah.
even use mine at home all the time too, because I think it's just so important, because it's all about, again, managing the risk and being aware that we serve a high risk population and need to be much more aware of controlling temperatures and times and things like that. Also making sure that thermometer is accurate, and the best way to check on that is to calibrate it or adjust it periodically.
Yeah.
So, because they do kind of get out of calibration, just like your scale at home. Okay, chemical violations cited in the summer food service program primarily involved instances where dish detergent was stored next to a food and food contact surface, such as disposable serviceware or dish rags or even packaged foods. So Adam and Michael, what are the rules for handling chemicals, even something as simple as dish soap in the summer food service program?
Yeah, I think maybe one way to look at it is if you wouldn't want to eat it or drink it, you don't want it anywhere near your food or your utensils, your food contact surfaces, because that's just not intended to be ingested. It can cause harm. And again, as you mentioned, with a lot of the population here and with these kids, that they're going to be even more susceptible to some of these chemical exposures, and we just want to keep those separate. So just think like a splash, think like a drip. And where would I go if I was that thing? Would I splash onto this food? Would I drip onto this food? And just keep the chemical stuff away from those items.
Sure. And I think beyond food too. Think about, the paper plates, the disposable silverware, things that are going to touch the food.
A lot of times, a lot of those pieces of materials are in a little tote bag, all kind of mushed together.
Yeah.
And that's something that they need to be aware of, is maybe the dish detergent shouldn't be in the tote bag with all the plates and spoons and things like that.
Sure.
And also another thing about chemicals is some of them are such pretty colors that if they're not labeled appropriately, I mean, they can look like Gatorade or Powerade, and it's so easy to mistake a chemical for something that's edible,
absolutely.
because they do smell and look attractive.
Yeah, they smell good, and especially if we get frugal, we care about the environment, and so we think we're going to reuse a container or do something like that. You have to be just so careful that it's very clearly labeled that something that's not. So we had an example a few years ago where there was a blue degreaser in a gallon jug, and the facility also used blue raspberry flavoring in a gallon jug.
Oh, I heard about this.
Came off, and they actually served out degreaser
On the snow cones? Yes, I heard about that.
And so fortunately, that was not a great smelling thing,
No.
but it sure looked pretty. And so fortunately, no one was injured with that. That could have been a really, really bad situation.
Yeah, that was. Okay, cross-contamination is the process of spreading harmful microorganisms from one source to another. So Adam and Michael, what are some examples of cross-contamination observed in the summer food service program?
I don't know, Michael, if you've seen any in person.
You see several things. Oftentimes, it's just separating. If it's a facility that's handling raw product, it can be raw food and ready-to-eat food. Sometimes it's sometimes it can be those food contact surfaces if they have a little raw product and they don't sanitize and then move to a ready product.
I always worry about people, like they're handling
Yeah.
something raw, like, or maybe deli meat or something like that, and then they pick up their drink and put their drink down, and then they're making a salad, and then they pick up that drink again, and it has contaminants from the last item they touched. So, I mean, those are some ways that it could easily happen without even realizing it.
Yeah.
Even just pushing up your glasses, or, wiping your hands on your apron or something like that.
It can come back to what we do with our hands so frequently that
think a lot of the times summer nutrition program sites are probably not in the like traditional kind of raw animal proteins mindset, but it's exactly those other things that we don't think about. How often we touch our face, we touch our cell phones now.
I know cell phones, it's the cell phone texting.
And the apron again, it's like to keep me clean, so I can keep rubbing things on the apron. And so just being cognizant, just being aware of where your hands are. I call it the if you're using gloves to prevent bare hand contact, you do the glove prayer when you're not actively working with the foods, so that you can keep your hands kind of aware of where they are and not recontaminate those. So
because I mean, when they do studies and they take bacterial cultures of some of these things like the telephone or your even the top of a pocket thermometer, one time they did a test reading on it, and that grew quite a lot of bacteria. So some of these obscure sites that you wouldn't even think of do harbor microorganisms on them and when we touch them we can cross-contaminate.
And cell phones are amazingly dirty.
Another group of products we might not think of traditionally though is raw. If you're getting raw produce, because everybody likes the local foods and we're really trying to push those, I think it's a good thing. But you have to recognize too that where those came from, depending on sources and so forth, a lot of times those have not been washed, and so they can be a source of contamination as well. So handling your unwashed produce, keeping it separate from food contact surfaces and ready-to-eat foods is important also.
Okay. A food safety requirement that was not one of the identified top 8 violations, but deserves some discussion, involves the requirement to label foods that are packaged on site and offered to the child as a self-service item. Can you explain more about this labeling requirement when foods are packaged on site and the customer or student or child is allowed to select it in a self-serve style of service?
Yeah, so the intent is that the consumer can make informed decisions. And sometimes you just have to draw a line somewhere so that everybody can plan for it. And we felt that if it's self-serve, the customer, in this case the child, wouldn't necessarily have to interact with program staff to be able to ask questions that they might have. So that self-service is where the line is drawn. So if it's packaged on site and it's offered for self-service, we require some basic labeling information to be available in one form or another. The biggest thing, of course, is food allergens. That's the biggest concern that we have, especially with summer nutrition program, where it's not, you're probably not as concerned about folks that might be trying to make a few extra cents by substituting or those kind of things. This is really just about getting the information, having it available. So we've made some options for folks that we think is reasonable and not overly burdensome. We think it's Goldilocks on the labeling, hopefully.
So they could, one of their choices, if they do not want to adhere to the labeling requirement, they could just not package the food item and do it a different way. Or they could have a staff person hand the food item to the customer without labeling, as long as that nutrition program staff person is aware of the customers or children who have allergies. But I do thank you for helping us work through some solutions for how we can adhere to the labeling requirement. If you could talk a little bit about some of these labeling options that were developed, that would be great.
Yeah, and so, just step back for a second on, if you decide to not package the item, think about, is it better to be packaged if there's blowing dust, if you're at an outdoor service site, something like that. We really don't want the labeling to be a barrier to protecting, to you making a good decision on protecting the food from the environment. So that's why we also have come up with some of these other options. So you can either just label it with the required information, if that works, a sticky label or something like that. We just want it to be legible and contain the information. Alternatively, if that is not going to work, put up a sign or a placard or a poster that says that the information is available upon request, or you can put the recipe up next to the item, the shipping label, have that handy. But just the bottom line is that let people know that one way or another they can either get that information themselves at the point of selection, or that they can reach out to the operator and be able to get accurate information on request.
So what is your definition of packaged? I mean, what kinds of foods are we talking about?
Yeah, over the years with some operators in the business world, we had some arguments about what was packaged. So basically, if it's wrapped in a way that covers the food and it's contained in somehow, we're considering that packaged for the purposes of labeling.
So anytime it has more than one ingredient and you can't see through it, I mean, like for example, an apple that's in a clear package wouldn't need a label, but an apple that's in a tin foil or something like that you can't see what it is would need a label.
Yeah. Or a caramel apple.
Oh, that sounds even better.
More than one ingredient.
Or anything with 2 or more ingredients would need that label in order to protect those customers who have allergies. So thank you. Summer food service programs may choose to set up share tables as part of initiatives to reduce waste in the child nutrition programs. So items that can be placed on the share table include unopened, non-perishable packaged items and unopened, perishable cold items if certain food safety provisions are applied. Unopened, perishable cold items might include things like half pints of milk, individual containers of yogurt, individual packages of string cheese, wrapped fresh fruit with a non-edible peel. These are all things that can be put on the share table. Products placed on the share table can be offered to other children as an additional item during that meal service, or they can be saved, marked, and reserved at another meal, or they can be offered to the children as a snack during another program activity. And again, these are all about initiatives to reduce waste in your program. If you don't want to do any of those other options, you can also donate your items to a nonprofit charitable organization. The only restriction really on the share table items is they are not available for adult consumption or available to take home. The whole point of our programs is to feed children, and so we want to make sure that any foods that are from our program go to the intended consumer. So summer food service programs may also choose to procure locally grown or raised products for their summer meals. Local procurement of goods can safely occur under certain food safe conditions, ensuring that those locally grown fresh fruits and vegetables look and smell fresh. That local grower should also follow good agricultural practices. Do you want to chat a little bit about good agricultural practices?
Sure. So good agricultural practices are thinking about how produce can become contaminated when it's being grown. So looking at everything from where do you get your water? Is the water appropriate quality and is it protected? Because a lot of our national outbreaks with produce are related to irrigation water. So does the water contact the produce itself is one big key there. Another thing is what type of pesticides are used. Are they used that are labeled for that product, and do they follow any restrictions such as post-harvest intervals to where you have to wait so long after application before you can harvest. So that's another good one. Keep an eye out for contamination from wildlife or domestic animals, making sure that's separate. Is there runoff from from a livestock yard up the hill?
Yeah.
All those kind of things. But the bottom line is thinking about how can these products become contaminated? How are they handled in the field? Worker hygiene when they're being picked, all those kind of things are covered by good agricultural practices.
So part of the responsibility that the site would have or the program would have is just making sure they're buying from local producers who they feel are reputable and following good food handling practices and things like that.
Yeah, some folks are certified. They might have a good agricultural practices, a GAP certification. And that can be pretty intensive to get, so not everyone will have that, especially smaller producers. So really then it becomes about understanding, working with them, building a relationship with the producer and understanding their knowledge of food safety practices and growing produce and harvesting and handling produce and being comfortable with that.
And local procurement now is kind of covering the whole tray or the whole plate. Local meat and poultry, dairy, I don't know, all kinds of things are out there now. Grain foods can all be purchased locally. I know local meat and poultry must be slaughtered and processed in a fully licensed and inspected facility. And that meat or poultry product must be identified as to its contents, date of processing, and inspection labeling. So a lot of the local foods that we look to procure have to follow the same food safety handling protocol as foods that are purchased commercially. Shell eggs are allowed, and they can be purchased locally from a licensed facility that's either inspected or applies the egg stamp purchased from the Kansas Department of Agriculture. Shell eggs have to be fresh, whole, clean, and meet grade B quality standards. And a lot of the liquid milk that we already procure is local, since milk doesn't come very far before it gets to our door, and our liquid milk must be pasteurized and be grade A quality. So if you have any questions or want to know more about the Farm to Plate in child nutrition programs, go on our website and click on the Farm to Plate icon, or contact Barb Depew in our office. She's our Farm to Plate director, and she can help provide you information of who are our local providers in the state of Kansas that have already been kind of vetted and looked at. So
one point on the eggs, that the producer would have to be licensed, and then they can either pay the inspection fee by a quarterly assessment or by the stamps. So if you have a question about the producer, we can help work with them, but you could just ask the egg producer, are you licensed? And then if their cartons don't come with the egg stamp on them, then you could just double check that they're paying quarterly instead.
So it doesn't mean, local doesn't mean that you can make stuff at home and bring it in. So local does need to be, from approved suppliers in a sense, who have been vetted in some way, either by you or by some agency. But I know local foods is something that we're really thinking real hard on and want to promote. Summer food service program nutrition program staff have a lot at stake as they prepare and serve food each day. Serving healthy and nutritious meals involves protecting the food from contamination. Children are a highly susceptible population and are more likely to get sick from consuming contaminated foods. So it's important for all summer food service program personnel to understand how risks are significantly reduced when food safe practices are followed. Program staff should constantly consider the consequences and ask themselves, what is the possible negative impact to the customers, the program, and the team if I do not follow food safe practices for this activity? So ensure enough information, training, and on-site follow-up is provided so that all team members achieve the same level of understanding on food safety. Developing and implementing a food safety training program is an important part of the summer food service program, and that training really should concentrate on areas that are critical to food safety, including that personal hygiene, preparing and serving foods, cleaning and sanitizing, and food allergies. And make it easy to apply these food safe practices with the availability of enough supplies, equipment, time, and staff to get the job done safely and reduce risk to the fullest extent possible in the program. As partners in helping sponsors deliver safe and nutritious meals in the summer food service program, the Kansas State Department of Education and the Kansas Department of Agriculture work very closely to provide oversight and education to organizations that serve food to children. And we want to be sure that you're fully equipped to do the job appropriately. So we want to have a little bit of time for questions and answers. So if you have questions, you can type them in the chat box. I will open up the phone line so that anybody on the phone line, if they have any questions, and then Adam and Michael, if there's anything else you want to add to the content, please feel free to do so.
Yeah, no, I appreciate putting up our contact information there. We can get you in touch with Michael.
That's all right. Oh, no, that's all right.
We can get you in touch with Michael, too, if you want.
Yeah.
If you're in the Topeka area, Michael works here with some other folks in this area.
Sure.
And then just feel free to contact Autumn with any questions.
Yeah, I would say, and contact Autumn.
Contact Autumn.
Well, I was
Sure.
going to say is that I am one of 40-some inspectors statewide. And if you have specific questions or need somebody on site, Autumn can put you in touch with whoever is in your area.
Yeah, just contact whoever's handy
Yeah.
on the web. You can contact me, contact Autumn, or whoever you have been in contact with our program, we'll be happy to either answer your question or get you in touch with.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to ask questions. I mean, that's, you know, part of the educational component of the two agencies working together, is we want to make sure you have the tools.
Much rather answer a couple of questions than have to come in and say, well, no, that's not right.
So anybody have any questions? I can email the presentation to you. Just contact me. My information's on the next slide. I'm sitting in another weird, oh, here it is. Okay, there's my contact information, C.L. Johnson or Kelly. We can email it in like a PDF handout kind of file. It won't have all of the information that we talked about, but Sean is recording this for us. So we hope to make this available as a recording if you would like to offer the recording to maybe some other staff members who you feel like need to hear this information.